What would it feel like to live in a town where wetlands stretch for miles in every direction? In Florida, vast swamp systems still shape daily life in ways most visitors never notice. Today, we're counting down 10 Florida towns surrounded by swamps and exploring the geography, history, and infrastructure choices that keep them feeling remote. Florida is famous for beaches and theme parks, but much of the state is still defined by marshes, cypress forests, and slow-moving rivers that once made travel incredibly difficult. Long before highways and airboats, these wetlands dictated where settlements could form, how goods were transported, and which communities remained small and self-reliant. Even in 2026, with modern roads and digital connectivity, some towns remain geographically isolated because of surrounding waterlogged terrain, protected wildlife areas, and limited development corridors. This series is not about labeling places as backward or forgotten. Every town discussed here has residents who value its quiet atmosphere, close-knit community, and proximity to nature. Remote doesn't mean disconnected from the world. It simply reflects fewer access routes, longer travel times to major cities, and landscapes that discourage rapid urban growth. Many people intentionally choose these towns for those very reasons. Our ranking is based on factors like road access, distance to major metropolitan centers, surrounding conservation land, population size, and economic concentration, not on quality of life. Some communities thrive precisely because they are hard to reach. Others remain small because environmental protections prevent large-scale development. Swamps, marshes, and wetlands are also ecologically critical, serving as flood buffers, wildlife habitats, and water filtration systems, so preservation often outweighs expansion. Let's start our countdown with number 10, a town shaped by fishing, forests, and waterways. Rank number 10, Carabel. Located in Florida's panhandle along the Gulf Coast, Carabel sits near river systems, coastal marshes, and protected wildlife areas that naturally limit outward growth. Historically a fishing and timber town, it developed around waterways rather than highways, which still influences its accessibility today. While modern roads connect Carabel to larger cities like Tallahassee, long stretches of undeveloped wetlands and forest preserve its small-town character. The surrounding swamps and estuaries play a major role in local life. Commercial fishing, boating, and ecotourism remain central to the economy, and many residents appreciate that conservation land keeps large resort developments at bay. At the same time, fewer transportation corridors mean longer drives for specialized medical care, large shopping centers, or major airports. One reason Carabel feels more secluded than many coastal Florida towns. Seasonal tourism brings activity during warmer months, but year-round population numbers remain modest. Housing development is carefully regulated near sensitive wetlands, which slows expansion but protects the ecosystems that define the area. For newcomers seeking tranquility, Carabel can feel like a hidden gem. For others used to urban convenience, it may seem distant, earning it the 10th spot on our list. Moving up to number 9 introduces another community where swampy terrain and conservation land shape everyday routines. Rank number 9, Okeechobee. Situated inland near Lake Okeechobee, this town is surrounded by wetlands, canals, and agricultural zones created by decades of water management projects. While the lake itself is massive and economically important, the network of marshes and flood control areas around it limits where roads and suburbs can spread, keeping Okeechobee more isolated than many Central Florida cities. Historically rooted in farming and cattle ranching, Okeechobee grew as a service center for rural industries rather than as a commuter suburb. Though highways connect it to Fort Pierce, West Palm Beach, and Orlando, distances remain significant, and travel can feel slow compared to coastal metro regions. The Everglades watershed influences everything from land use regulations to seasonal flooding patterns, shaping development choices. Life in Okeechobee revolves around outdoor recreation, agriculture, and lake-based tourism, such as fishing tournaments. Many residents value the open space and strong community ties, but limited job diversity and fewer entertainment options contribute to its remote reputation. Environmental protections around wetlands also restrict large-scale housing projects, reinforcing its smaller footprint. In Part 2, we'll continue the countdown with two more towns where swamps and marshlands remain central to geography, including one deep in the Big Bend region and another hidden along Florida's inland waterways. Some Florida towns aren't isolated because people forgot about them. They're isolated because nature still runs the map. Miles of wetlands, wildlife preserves, and slow-moving rivers continue to dictate where roads can go and where towns can expand. Up next are two communities where swamps and marshlands remain part of daily life rather than distant scenery. As we move further up the list, the pattern becomes clearer. Florida's vast wetland systems, including river floodplains, coastal marshes, and inland swamps, create natural barriers that shape transportation routes and limit suburban sprawl. In these areas, development must work around protected habitats, seasonal flooding, and fragile ecosystems, which keeps populations relatively small and preserves a slower pace of life. For residents, this means closer relationships with nature and neighbors alike, but also longer drives to major services and fewer commercial options. Rank number 8, Apalachicola. Nestled along Florida's forgotten coast, Apalachicola is surrounded by estuaries, tidal marshes, and river systems that have supported fishing and oyster harvesting for generations. These wetlands are not only central to the town's economy, but also form a natural boundary that limits road expansion and large-scale development. To reach Apalachicola, travelers pass through long stretches of coastal forest and protected shoreline, reinforcing the sense of seclusion even before arriving downtown. The town's historic district, filled with preserved wooden homes and brick streets, reflects its maritime past and contributes to its charm. Ecotourism plays a growing role, with visitors drawn to kayaking trails, bird-watching areas, and quiet beaches rather than major resorts. However, the same environmental protections that preserve this character also restrict new housing projects and industrial growth, keeping the population relatively stable rather than rapidly expanding. Residents often describe Apalachicola as peaceful but logistically distant. Larger hospitals, universities, and shopping centers are located hours away, and storm systems can temporarily disrupt travel along coastal highways. Still, for those who value heritage, conservation, and small-town life near water, Apalachicola's isolation is part of its appeal, placing it at number 8 on our list. Moving inland for number 7 brings us to a town shaped by canals, marshlands, and wide-open agricultural space. Rank number 7, Belglade. Located near the southern edge of Lake Okeechobee, Belglade sits amid a network of canals, levees, and reclaimed wetlands that define Florida's agricultural heartland. Often called part of the Glades, the town developed around sugarcane fields and water management systems designed to control flooding and irrigate crops. These engineered landscapes create long distances between communities and limit dense suburban growth, contributing to Belglade's remote feel. While major highways connect Belglade to Palm Beach County's coastal cities, the drive crosses miles of farmland and marshy terrain, reinforcing the sensation of leaving urban Florida behind. Employment centers remain concentrated in agriculture and related industries, and residents frequently travel elsewhere for specialized services or entertainment. Environmental regulations surrounding the Everglades ecosystem play a major role in shaping development. Large tracts of land are designated for conservation or water storage, preventing the kind of residential expansion seen in South Florida's coastal corridor. This has preserved Belglade's rural character, but also constrained economic diversification, keeping the town small relative to its geographic footprint. Despite these challenges, Belglade maintains a strong community identity rooted in generations of farming families and seasonal workers. Local festivals, school sports, and neighborhood gatherings provide social cohesion in a place where everyone tends to know each other. Its isolation isn't accidental. It's the result of geography, history, and environmental stewardship. In the next part, we'll continue climbing the list and explore two more Florida towns where swamps and wetlands still dominate the surrounding landscape, including one near a vast wildlife refuge and another tucked along a winding river system. The deeper you go into Florida's wetlands, the more the road network starts to thin out. Some towns survive by adapting to the swampy terrain rather than trying to conquer it. Next are two communities where rivers, refuges, and protected marshes make isolation part of everyday geography. As we reach the midpoint of our countdown, the towns on this list become even more shaped by environmental boundaries. Vast wildlife management areas, river floodplains, and preserved cypress forests restrict highway construction and suburban growth, resulting in fewer access points and longer travel times to major urban centers. In these regions, daily life revolves around water levels, fishing seasons, hunting regulations, and ecotourism rather than rush hour traffic or high-rise construction. Rank number 6, Chiefland. Situated in North Florida, near the Suwannee River Basin, Chiefland is surrounded by low-lying wetlands, forested floodplains, and rural conservation land that create natural buffers between it and larger cities. While U.S. highways connect Chiefland to Gainesville and the Gulf Coast, travelers pass through long stretches of undeveloped land, reinforcing the town's rural feel. Historically rooted in agriculture and timber, Chiefland has remained small because nearby swamps and protected river corridors limit where housing and industry can spread. Seasonal flooding along tributaries influences road planning and zoning, which keeps development clustered rather than sprawling outward. Residents often rely on regional hubs for specialized healthcare or shopping, contributing to the perception of isolation. At the same time, Chiefland attracts outdoor enthusiasts drawn to nearby springs, fishing spots, and wildlife areas. For people seeking quiet surroundings and close ties to nature, the town offers an appealing alternative to crowded coastal regions. Its position at number 6 reflects a balance. Accessible enough for daily needs, yet geographically constrained by surrounding wetlands. Moving up one spot brings us to a town whose riverfront setting and swampy backwaters have long defined its economy and layout. Rank number 5, Wauchula. Located in central Florida near the Peace River, Wauchula sits amid marshy floodplains and agricultural lands shaped by seasonal water flow. Though not entirely encircled by swamps, the surrounding lowlands and conservation areas limit outward expansion and keep the community separated from dense suburban corridors like those around Tampa or Orlando. The town developed historically around cattle ranching, citrus groves, and phosphate-related industries, all of which depend on careful water management. Canals, wetlands, and retention areas form a patchwork landscape around the community, making large residential subdivisions less common than in drier regions. Long drives across rural roads are part of daily life for commuters heading toward coastal job markets. Residents describe Wauchula as close-knit and steady, with schools, local businesses, and civic organizations playing a central role in community identity. Outdoor recreation along the river and nearby nature preserves offers fishing, kayaking, and birdwatching, reinforcing the town's connection to surrounding ecosystems. Wauchula's placement at number 5 reflects its moderate isolation. Not unreachable, but clearly separated from Florida's major urban hubs by geography and land use restrictions. Its wetlands don't just surround it. They shape how the town grows, how people travel, and what industries dominate the region. In Part 4, we'll break into the top 4 and examine 2 Florida towns where swamp systems and conservation corridors make isolation even more pronounced, including one near a massive wildlife refuge and another deep in South Florida's interior. At this point in the countdown, Florida's wetlands aren't just nearby. They dominate the horizon. These towns are surrounded by protected lands so vast that expansion becomes nearly impossible. For residents, isolation here isn't a drawback. It's part of the lifestyle. As we enter the top 4, the communities become even more geographically constrained by swamps, marshes, and conservation corridors. Many of these areas border national wildlife refuges, state forests, or Everglades restoration zones where development is tightly regulated. Roads are fewer, population growth is slower, and long distances separate these towns from major commercial centers. While that can mean fewer conveniences, it also preserves ecosystems that are among the most biologically diverse in North America. Rank number 4, Everglades City. Located on Florida's southwest coast at the edge of Everglades National Park, Everglades City is one of the clearest examples of a community shaped by surrounding wetlands. Mangrove forests, tidal marshes, and protected waterways form a natural boundary in nearly every direction, making large-scale expansion impossible. Only a handful of highways reach the town, and most travel routes wind through conservation land or coastal backwaters. The town's economy centers on tourism related to the Everglades: airboat tours, fishing charters, kayaking excursions, and wildlife education centers. Residents live with constant awareness of tides, storms, and water levels, which influence everything from building codes to transportation planning. Because so much land nearby is federally protected, new housing developments are limited, keeping the population small and stable. Despite its isolation, Everglades City is far from stagnant. Visitors arrive year-round to experience Florida's wild landscapes, and research facilities and park operations provide steady employment. For those who choose to live there, the surrounding swamps aren't an obstacle. They're the main attraction. Moving even deeper into Florida's interior brings us to number 3, a town where remoteness is amplified by distance from highways and vast stretches of preserved land. Rank number 3, Immokalee. Situated inland between coastal metro areas and the Everglades ecosystem, Immokalee is bordered by agricultural fields, water management canals, and conservation zones that restrict urban sprawl. While major roads connect it to Naples and Fort Myers, travelers must cross long expanses of rural land and wetland corridors, reinforcing the feeling of separation from Florida's coastal development belt. Historically an agricultural hub, Immokalee's economy revolves around crop production, food processing, and seasonal labor cycles tied closely to South Florida's water systems. The surrounding wetlands and restoration projects shape land use planning, preventing dense suburban growth and preserving open space between communities. Residents rely heavily on regional centers for higher education, advanced healthcare, and major retail, making long drives a regular part of life. However, Immokalee also has strong cultural institutions, local markets, and community organizations that give it a distinct identity independent of nearby cities. Its placement at number 3 reflects how water management infrastructure, conservation priorities, and geographic distance combine to keep the town relatively isolated despite being located within a populous part of the state. In the final part, we'll reveal the top 2 most swamp-surrounded and geographically isolated towns on our list, places where wetlands truly dictate every aspect of development and access. When wetlands stretch farther than highways, isolation becomes a defining feature of daily life. These final 2 towns sit so close to Florida's wildest landscapes that development has almost no room to move. Their remoteness isn't accidental. It's the result of geography, conservation, and history working together. At the very top of our list are communities where swamps, marshes, and protected land surround nearly every access route. These towns have limited road connections, small populations, and large buffers of conservation land separating them from major cities. While modern technology and infrastructure keep residents connected to the outside world, physical distance and environmental preservation still shape how these places function. Rank number 2, LaBelle. Located along the Caloosahatchee River in southwest Florida, LaBelle is bordered by floodplains, wetlands, and agricultural lands managed carefully for water control. While it has grown in recent decades, much of the surrounding territory remains undeveloped due to environmental protections and seasonal flooding risks. The river itself, along with canals and retention areas, forms a natural network that restricts where roads and neighborhoods can expand. Historically a cattle and farming community, LaBelle retains a rural atmosphere despite its proximity to Fort Myers and coastal development zones. Residents often commute long distances for specialized jobs, higher education, or medical services, reinforcing the perception of isolation. At the same time, outdoor recreation, boating, fishing, hiking, and birdwatching plays a major role in local life. Local leaders balance growth with preservation, recognizing that the wetlands surrounding LaBelle serve as critical flood control systems and wildlife habitats. This careful approach to development keeps the town quieter than many Southwest Florida communities, earning it the second spot on our list. Finally, at number 1, we reach a Florida town where swamp systems dominate the map almost entirely. Ranked number 1, Clewiston. Situated on the southern shore of Lake Okeechobee, Clewiston is encircled by canals, agricultural zones, and wetlands connected to the broader Everglades watershed. Large tracts of land around the town are dedicated to water management and conservation, leaving limited space for outward suburban expansion. With only a few major highways connecting it to coastal cities, travel often involves long drives across rural landscapes and reclaimed marshland. Known historically as America's sweetest town because of its sugar industry, Clewiston developed around farming operations that depend heavily on controlled water flow. The surrounding swamps and flood control systems remain central to both the economy and the town's layout. Environmental regulations tied to Everglades restoration continue to shape future growth, reinforcing its geographic isolation. Residents enjoy tight-knit neighborhoods, strong school communities, and a slower pace of life compared to Florida's coastal metros. Fishing on Lake Okeechobee, wildlife observation, and outdoor festivals draw visitors, but large-scale tourism remains limited due to infrastructure constraints and environmental priorities. Clewiston's position at number 1 reflects how completely wetlands define its boundaries. Here, swamps aren't just nearby. They determine how the town connects to the rest of Florida.